Hello, this is Brian Heim with Fabrication's Living History Project. Today we're meeting with Morrie Yellen. He was a B-17 Bombardier in the 15th Air Force stationed in Italy during World War II. Morrie, we're very grateful to have you on the show, and thank you for taking your time today to sit down and talk with us.
My name is Morrie Yellen. I was a Bombardier on a B-17 flying out of Foggia, Italy. We were in the 15th Air Force. I was assigned to the 2nd Bomb Group with the 20th Squadron. The squadron considered 7 flying airplanes, and there were 4 squadrons per bomb group. Each bomb group had their own airplanes, and they had their own insignias, and they were usually B-17s in Italy or B-24s. I was stationed with a B-17 group, which was right near Foggia, Italy, on the Adriatic coast between Bari and Manfredonia. Our missions consisted of flying out of Italy up the Adriatic, crossing the coast, going over the mountains, and we would fly into Germany, Austria, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and any of the flights and eventually we flew into France, which was then we had the Battle of Southern France, or the invasion of Southern France. I joined my squadron. I joined my crew in Tampa, Florida, in 1944, about March or maybe even February. There were 10 men assigned. Our airplane had 10 men, which was the pilot and the co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, waist gunners, top turret gunner, and rear tail gunner, and radio man. We all took our basic training in Tampa, and we were indoctrinated into flying with this crew, which we were like a unit. After our basic training, or whatever they called it, down in Tampa, we flew to Savannah, and we picked up our airplane. From Savannah, we went on to up in Maine, and there we landed in Maine, and then we were briefed and all, given new instruments, wristwatches and stuff, and from there we flew to Newfoundland. And from Newfoundland, we flew across the ocean to the Azores, and from the Azores we came into North Africa. From North Africa we went up to Bari, and eventually we landed in Foggia, Italy. And that was approximately about the 5th of July. We were assigned a tent, and the officers slept in one tent, and the enlisted men slept in another tent. And then we were briefed on what our missions would be, and we started to fly about the 5th or 7th of July. We picked up an airplane in Bari. It wasn't the airplane we flew over, but that was assigned to the 2nd Bomb Group. And then we started to fly. About the 2nd or 3rd mission, flying out of Bari, out of Foggia, our entire squadron of 7 airplanes was destroyed by flak fire and enemy aircraft. None of the airplanes returned. When I had been flying every other day, and that day I was not flying. Of course, when we heard this, we were all devastated. That evening, we received 7 new crews from Bari with airplanes. From then on, I never flew with my crew. We were all assigned to these new crews to kind of break them in to the rigors of flying combat. I flew 51 missions. Some missions were considered one mission, some missions were considered 2 missions. I had a total of 51 missions, ending up in Italy in January of 1945. That's all we had to fly. Actually, was 50 missions, which was, I think at the time, I never kept a perfect record, was about 36 or 37 times over the target. So anyhow, that was our story. We lost all our airplanes, and we had new crews come in. From then on, I was flying with different crews all the time. I started out in Italy as a flight officer, became commissioned as a second lieutenant, and then as a first lieutenant before I came home from overseas. After I had finished up, was on my way home, my crew were behind me flying missions. They flew a mission into Germany, and they were hit by aircraft and enemy fire, and they crash landed, and 4 of them were killed on the ground by the Nazi soldiers, and the other 5 got out and came home. I lost my navigator on my first mission, on his first mission to Ploesti. My co-pilot was flying a mission, and he was knocked down and came back through Romania, through Yugoslavia and Greece. So we had at that time during the war, the flying was, I don't know how you would call it. We would fly the lead squadron one time, and then from then on, you'd work your way up to the front. There were times that your missions were 8 and 10 hours long, and they were very tiring if you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and got back at 4 o'clock in the evening before you got debriefed and then headed home to sleep. And you were notified the evening before whether you were flying or not. That is all I can tell you about my experiences flying. Outside of everybody, there was never a bad day as far as we were concerned. We had a job to do, and we did it, and nobody ever said that they wouldn't fly. And when we weren't flying, we had a lot of fun because we had a nice group of guys. We would play cards. We had a nice mess hall, recreation center, and at times we could get to town for a little rest and relaxation. We got to go to Naples. We got to go to the Isle of Capri, which wasn't long, but it was still time off from flying.